The drilling machine made a loud grinding noise as G1 pushed it deeper into the rock. Dust filled the air around him, and sweat ran down his face despite the cold temperature of the tunnel. He had been working alone for 6 hours now, deep in the mining tunnels beneath Keras 7. Most of the other workers had gone back to the main colony for dinner, but G1 preferred the quiet of the empty tunnels. He pulled the drill back and wiped his forehead. The communication device on his belt suddenly crackled to life. G1, come in. This is Hayuk. His supervisor's voice sounded tense. I'm here. What's wrong? We picked up a distress signal. A ship crashed in the northern mountains about 20 miles from your position. Can you get there faster than anyone from the main colony? G1 looked at his equipment. Yes, I have my transport outside. What kind of ship? There was a pause. That's the problem. It's a Rathic vessel. G1 felt his chest tighten. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Rathic. They were enormous wolf-like creatures who stood 8 feet tall and could tear through steel with their bare claws. They were warriors, traders, and most importantly, they were fiercely protective of their own kind. I'm on my way, G1 said. He gathered his emergency medical kit and climbed into his small transport vehicle. The journey through the rocky terrain took nearly an hour. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. As he drove, his communication device buzzed again. G1, this is Mirai from Medical. Be careful out there. If there are injured Rathic, don't try to treat them yourself. Just mark the location and come back. Understood, G1 replied, but he wasn't sure if he could follow that order. If someone was dying, he couldn't just walk away. The crash site was easy to find. Black smoke rose from a valley between 2 mountains. G1 parked his vehicle and climbed down the rocky slope. The ship was small, maybe a scout vessel. It had torn through several trees before slamming into the ground. The metal hull was split open and fire still burned in some sections. Hello, G1 called out. Is anyone alive? He heard a sound. Not a voice but a whimper. Something small and afraid. G1 moved carefully around the wreckage. The cockpit was crushed, and he could see 2 large Rathic bodies inside, clearly dead. His heart sank. But the whimpering sound came again from the back of the ship. He found them in what must have been a sleeping compartment. 2 small Rathic cubs, each about the size of a large dog. Their fur was gray and soft, and their eyes were barely open. One had a deep cut on its side, and both were shaking from cold and fear. Oh no, G1 whispered. These were children. Babies. He activated his communication device. Yuck, I found the ship. 2 adult Rathic are dead, but there are 2 cubs here still alive. They're badly hurt. The response came quickly, but it wasn't Hayuk. It was Tai Yang, the defense coordinator. G1, listen carefully. A Rathic warship just entered our system. They're demanding to know what happened to their scout ship. They think we shot it down. What? That's insane. It was an accident. They don't believe us. They're sending a message now. Hold on. There was silence for a moment, then Taeyang's voice returned, shakier than before. They say if we don't return their young safely, they will destroy the entire colony. They're coming, G1. The whole pack is coming. G1 looked at the 2 small creatures whimpering in the wreckage. They were bleeding and cold. They needed help immediately or they would die within hours. How long do we have? He asked. They'll reach orbit in about 8 hours. Ground forces will land shortly after. G1 made a decision. I'm taking the cubs to my outpost. It's closer than the colony and I have medical supplies there. G1, no. Bring them to the main medical center. We have better equipment. There's no time. They'll die before I get there. My outpost is 10 minutes away. Hyuk's voice cut in. G1, if you take those cubs, you'll be alone out there. If something goes wrong, we can't help you. I understand, G1 said. But they're dying right now. I have to try. He carefully lifted the first cub. It made a weak crying sound and tried to bite him, but it was too weak. Its fur was soft under his hands, and he could feel its heart beating fast with fear. He wrapped it in his jacket and placed it gently in his transport. The second cub was even weaker and didn't resist at all. As G1 drove toward his outpost, he could hear both cubs making small, sad noises behind him. His outpost was a simple building carved into the side of a mountain. It had a sleeping area, a small kitchen, and a workroom with his tools and some basic medical supplies. He had lived there alone for 3 years, preferring the solitude to the crowded main colony. He carried both cubs inside and laid them on his bed. The larger one had a deep cut that was still bleeding. The smaller one was breathing in short, quick gasps. Ji-won opened his medical kit and started working. He cleaned the wound on the first cub and used medical glue to seal it. The cub cried out in pain, and Ji-won spoke softly to it. "I know it hurts. I'm sorry, but I'm trying to help you." The second cub was harder to treat. It was going into shock from blood loss. Ji-won set up an IV line using fluids meant for humans. He had no idea if it would work on Rothic biology, but he had to try something. Hours passed. Ji-won worked without stopping, checking their vital signs, keeping them warm, giving them fluids. His hands shook from exhaustion, but he didn't rest. His communication device buzzed constantly with updates from the colony. The Rothic warship had arrived. More ships were joining it. The pack was gathering in orbit, their weapons charged and ready. They had sent one message to the colony: "Return our cubs by sunrise or you all die." But Ji-won couldn't move them. Not yet, they were too weak. The smaller one had stopped breathing twice, and he had to revive it both times. As the night deepened, Ji-won finally allowed himself to sit down next to the bed. The cubs were sleeping now, their breathing more steady. He had done everything he could. Now he just had to wait and hope it was enough. Outside, in the darkness, he knew the pack was coming. Angry, grieving, and ready for war. And somewhere above, in the cold of space, warships full of the galaxy's most dangerous warriors were preparing to descend. Ji-won looked at the two small cubs sleeping on his bed. They looked peaceful now, almost content. He reached out and gently touched the soft fur on one's head. It made a small sound, almost like a purr, but didn't wake up. "I won't let anyone hurt you," he whispered. "I promise." The main colony's alarm system screamed through the darkness. Red lights flashed across every building as people ran through the streets, heading for the emergency shelters. Hyuk stood in the command center, watching the screens that showed dozens of Rothic ships descending through the atmosphere. "How many?" he asked Somin, the communications officer. 43 ships confirmed," she replied, her fingers flying across her console. "More are still coming from the outer system. This isn't just a rescue team. This is their entire battle fleet." Taeyang burst into the room, his face pale. "Defense systems are online, but they won't hold for more than a few minutes against this kind of force. We need to evacuate." "Evacuate where?" Hyuk snapped. "They control the orbit. They control the airspace. There's nowhere to go." Somin raised her hand. "I'm getting another transmission from the pack leader. Audio only." The voice that came through the speakers was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. It spoke in heavily accented human standard language. "I am Alpha Vrix of the Blood Mountain Pack. You have taken our young. You will return them now, or your colony will become dust." Hyuk leaned toward the microphone. "Alpha Vrix, please listen. The crash was an accident. Your scout ship had engine failure. We didn't attack it. We're trying to help the cubs." "Lies," the voice growled. "We know what humans do. You steal young ones. You experiment on them. You sell them to collectors. We have seen this before with other species. No, I swear to you, we're not like that. One of our people is treating the cubs right now." "They're alive." There was a long silence. Then Alpha Vrix spoke again. "Prove it. Show us our cubs now." Hyuk looked at Somin desperately. She shook her head. "Ji-won isn't responding. His outpost communication system is offline. He probably shut it down to focus on treating the cubs." "Then send someone to get him," Taeyang said. "We don't have time. The pack will land in minutes." Hyuk made a decision. "Tell them the cubs are in the eastern tunnels. That will buy us time to reach Ji-won and bring him here with the cubs." Somin hesitated. "Sir, if we lie to them, it's not a complete lie. Ji-won's outpost connects to the eastern tunnel system. Just send the message." Somin transmitted the information. On the screen, they watched as several Rothic dropships changed course, heading toward the eastern side of the colony. "Mirai," Hyuk spoke into his communication device. "Take a team and get to Ji-won's outpost. Bring him and the cubs back here immediately." In the medical center, Mirai was packing emergency supplies when she heard the order. She grabbed 2 other staff members and ran to a transport vehicle. But before they could leave, the first Rothic dropship landed directly in front of the medical center. The door of the ship opened, and 5 enormous Rothic warriors emerged. They wore dark armor and carried weapons that hummed with energy. The leader, who wore red markings on his armor, stepped forward. He was easily 8 feet tall, with silver-gray fur and eyes that glowed yellow in the darkness. "I am Beta Karn," he announced. "Where are our cubs?" Mirai stepped forward, her legs shaking but her voice steady. They're being treated. They were badly injured in the crash. We're doing everything we can to save them. Beta Karn moved closer, and Mirai could smell something like pine and smoke coming from his fur. You ask me to believe that you care for our young? After what your kind did on the Helio station? After what happened to the cubs of the Iron Claw Pack? I don't know what you're talking about, Mirai said honestly. But I'm a doctor. I took an oath to help anyone who needs it regardless of their species. Words, Karn snarled. Show me the cubs or I will tear this building apart. Before Mirai could respond, an explosion rocked the eastern side of the colony. The Rothic had started breaching the tunnel entrances. In the command center, Hyuk watched in horror as the situation spiraled out of control. The pack was moving through the colony with terrifying efficiency. They weren't killing anyone yet, but they were destroying everything in their path, searching for the cubs. We need to surrender, Soman said, before someone dies. If we surrender without the cubs, they'll think we killed them, Taeyang replied. We're dead either way. Hyuk slammed his fist on the console. Why isn't Jiwon answering? At the outpost, Jiwon had no idea what was happening at the colony. He had shut down his communication system hours ago because the constant messages were disturbing the cubs. Right now, they needed quiet and rest more than anything. The smaller cub had started breathing normally again, which was a good sign. But both cubs had developed a fever. Jiwon didn't know if that was normal for Rothic or a sign of infection. He had given them antibiotics designed for humans, hoping their biology was similar enough for it to work. He sat on the floor next to his bed, monitoring their vital signs on a handheld device. Every few minutes, he would reach up and check if their breathing was steady. His own body was exhausted. He hadn't eaten in nearly 12 hours, and his hands were covered in scratches from when the cubs had struggled against his treatment. The larger cub opened its eyes and looked at him. Jiwon froze, expecting it to cry out or try to bite him. Instead, it just stared at him with large, amber-colored eyes. Then it made a soft chirping sound and closed its eyes again. Jiwon felt something warm spread through his chest. The cub had relaxed. It was starting to trust him. Back at the colony, the situation had become desperate. The Rothic had breached the eastern tunnels and found nothing. Beta Karn had taken Hyuk and Mirai as prisoners, dragging them to the center of the colony where Alpha Vrix's ship had landed. The Alpha himself emerged from the ship, and even the other Rothic seemed to shrink in his presence. He was massive, with scars covering his face and arms. His fur was almost black, with streaks of white that spoke of his age. When he walked, the ground seemed to tremble. He looked at Hyuk with eyes full of rage and grief. You said the cubs were in the tunnels. There is nothing there but empty chambers and mining equipment. You lied to me. Please, Hyuk begged. Give me time. I can find them. I can bring them to you. Alpha Vrix leaned down until his face was inches from Hyuk's. Time? You want time? My mate died in that crash. Those cubs are all I have left of her. Every moment they are missing is another moment they could be suffering. Another moment they could be dying. His voice grew louder until it was almost a roar. You humans are all the same. You see profit in everything. You see our young as commodities. That's not true, Mirai shouted. The man who has your cubs is risking his life to save them. He's been working for hours without rest. He's using his own medical supplies, his own resources. He's not doing it for money. He's doing it because it's right. Alpha Vrix turned his glowing eyes to her. Then bring him here. Bring him and the cubs here now. I can't, Mirai said. His communication system is down. I don't know exactly where his outpost is. I would need time to search. The Alpha straightened to his full height and looked at the sky. Dawn was beginning to break, painting the horizon with light. He raised his head and let out a howl that made everyone's blood run cold. It was a sound of pure grief and fury, and it echoed across the entire valley. When he finished, he looked back at the humans. You have until sunrise is complete. That is 1 hour. If my cubs are not returned by then, I will give the order. Every human on this planet will die. We will burn your buildings. We will collapse your tunnels. We will erase every trace that you were ever here. He turned and walked back toward his ship. 1 hour. Not 1 minute more. Somin, still at the command center, frantically tried every communication channel she could think of. Jiwon, please respond. Jiwon, this is an emergency. The entire colony is going to die if you don't answer. But at the outpost, the communication device remained silent. Jiwon had unplugged it completely to save power for the medical equipment keeping the cubs alive. He had no idea that thousands of lives now depended on him. He had no idea that the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy were preparing to destroy everything. He only knew that 2 small cubs needed him and he would not abandon them. The smaller cub whimpered in its sleep and Jiwon reached up to gently stroke its head. "Shh," he whispered. "You're safe. I promise you're safe." 3 days had passed since Jiwon brought the cubs to his outpost. He had lost track of time completely. Day and night blended together into one endless cycle of checking temperatures, administering medicine, and fighting to keep 2 small lives from slipping away. The smaller cub had been the biggest challenge. Its body kept rejecting the fluids Jiwon was giving it. He had tried everything in his medical kit, but nothing seemed to work. Then, in desperation, he had done something crazy. He had given the cub a transfusion of his own blood. It shouldn't have worked. Human and Rathic biology were completely different. But somehow, miraculously, it did work. Within hours, the cub's condition improved. Its breathing became easier and its fever began to drop. But the success came at a cost. Jiwon had given so much of his blood that he could barely stand. His vision blurred when he tried to walk and his hands shook constantly. He knew he should rest, but he couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined the cubs dying while he slept. The larger cub was recovering faster. Its wound had closed cleanly, and it had even started eating small amounts of food that Jiwon had mashed up for it. It watched him constantly with those large amber eyes, and sometimes it would make soft chirping sounds when he came near. On the 4th morning, Jiwon woke up from a brief nap to find both cubs staring at him. They were sitting up on the bed looking stronger than they had in days. When Jiwon stood up, the larger cub chirped and reached out a small paw toward him. "You're feeling better," Jiwon said, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. He reached out and gently touched the cub's head. Its fur was soft and warm. The cub leaned into his touch and made a sound that was almost like purring. The smaller cub, not wanting to be left out, crawled across the bed and pushed its head against Jiwon's other hand. For the first time in days, Jiwon smiled. They were going to survive. He had done it. That's when he heard the sound of an engine outside. Someone was approaching the outpost. Jiwon moved to the window and saw a small transport vehicle racing toward him across the rocky ground. It was driving recklessly, bouncing over stones and nearly tipping over several times. When it finally skidded to a stop outside, a young woman jumped out and ran toward the door. Jiwon recognized her. It was Nari, one of the younger colonists who worked in supply management. She looked terrified. He opened the door and Nari practically fell inside. She was breathing hard and her clothes were torn. "Jiwon," she gasped. "You have to come with me right now. The colony. The Rathic. Everyone is going to die." "Slow down," Jiwon said, steadying her. "What happened?" "The pack came for their cubs. They think we killed them. They've been tearing the colony apart looking for them. Alpha Vrix gave us until sunrise 3 days ago to return the cubs, and when we couldn't, She stopped, her voice breaking. "He started destroying everything. Buildings, equipment, everything. They've taken hostages. Hayuk and Mirai are prisoners. They're going to execute them at sunset today if the cubs aren't returned." Jiwon felt his blood turn cold. 3 days ago? Why didn't anyone contact me? "We tried. I sent messages constantly, but you never responded. We thought—" Nari's eyes drifted to the 2 cubs on the bed. Her mouth fell open. "Oh, my stars. You actually have them. You saved them." "They were dying," Jiwon said quietly. "I couldn't move them. They needed constant care." Nari grabbed his arm. "We need to take them to the colony right now. Show the pack that they're alive. It's the only way to stop this." Jiwon looked at the 2 cubs. They were stronger, yes, but they were still weak. The smaller one especially. "They're not ready to travel yet. The stress could kill them, and staying here will definitely kill everyone in the colony," Nari shouted. "Jiwon, there are 3,000 people there, children, families. They're all going to die if you don't bring these cubs back." Jiwon felt torn. He looked at the cubs, then at Nari, then back at the cubs. The larger one chirped at him, sensing his distress. "How bad is it at the colony?" he asked, Nari's eyes filled with tears. "Bad. The Rathic have destroyed half our buildings. They're not killing people, but several have been injured trying to stop them. And they're angry, Jiwon, so angry. They think we're lying about the cubs being alive. They think we're stalling." "Because we are stalling," Jiwon said bitterly. "No, because you were saving their lives." Nari moved closer to the bed and looked at the cubs. They're so small. I didn't think they would be so small. The smaller cub looked at her and made a weak chirping sound. Nari smiled despite her fear. Hello, little one. Your family is very worried about you. Jiwon made a decision. I'll take them. But I need a few hours to prepare them for the journey. I need to make sure they're stable enough. We don't have a few hours. Sunset is in 3 hours. Then I'll have to work fast. Jiwon moved to his medical supplies and started gathering what he would need. You should go back to the colony. Tell them I'm coming. I'm not leaving you alone, Nari said firmly. What if something goes wrong? You look like you can barely stand. She was right. Jiwon's exhaustion was catching up to him. He had barely eaten in days, and the blood loss from the transfusions had left him weak and dizzy. Fine. Help me gather these supplies. For the next 2 hours, they worked together to prepare for the journey. Jiwon created a special carrier for the cubs, padded with soft material and equipped with portable medical monitors. He set up IV lines that could continue giving them fluids during the trip. He even rigged up a small heating system to keep them warm. The cubs seemed to sense that something was changing. They became quieter, more watchful. The larger one stayed close to Jiwon, following him around the small outpost as he worked. They trust you, Nari observed. I've never heard of Rothic cubs bonding with another species like this. I'm all they've known since they woke up, Jiwon said. I fed them. I kept them warm. I talked to them. In their minds I must be... He paused, realizing what he was about to say. Their parent, Nari finished softly. You must be like their parent. Jiwon didn't respond. He carefully lifted the smaller cub and placed it in the carrier. It whimpered and tried to climb back out, reaching for him. I know, he said gently. I know you don't want to go in there. But it's just for a little while. I promise. The larger cub was more cooperative, allowing itself to be placed next to its sibling, but it kept its eyes locked on Jiwon the entire time. As they prepared to leave, Jiwon felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. He grabbed the edge of a table to steady himself. Jiwon. Nari rushed to his side. Are you okay? I'm fine. Just tired. But even as he said it, his vision blurred at the edges. He had given too much of himself to save these cubs. His body was shutting down. You're not fine, Nari said, her voice full of worry. You need medical attention. The cubs need me more, Jiwon said stubbornly. He pushed himself upright and picked up the carrier. Both cubs chirped at him and the sound gave him strength. They loaded the carrier into Nari's transport and began the journey to the main colony. As they drove across the rough terrain, Jiwon kept one hand on the carrier, monitoring the cubs' vital signs on his handheld device. Their heart rates had increased from the stress, but they were holding steady. Tell me about the colony, Jiwon said to Nari, trying to stay focused. What exactly did the pack do? They came down like a storm, Nari said, her hands gripping the steering controls tightly. Dozens of ships, hundreds of warriors. They didn't attack at first. Alpha Vrix demanded to see the cubs. When Hayuk couldn't produce them, the Alpha thought it was a trick. He thought we had killed them and were trying to cover it up. Why would he think that? Apparently it's happened before. Other species have stolen Rothic cubs to sell them or use them in experiments. The pack has fought wars over it. They don't trust anyone when it comes to their young. Jiwon looked down at the two small creatures in the carrier beside him. They were so vulnerable, so innocent. The idea that anyone would hurt them made him angry. I would never let anyone hurt them, he said quietly. I know, Nari replied, and hopefully the pack will see that too. As they approached the colony, Jiwon could see the damage. Smoke rose from several buildings. Large sections of the perimeter wall had been torn down, and everywhere he could see the massive forms of Rothic warriors patrolling the streets. In the center of the colony, a crowd had gathered. Humans and Rothic faced each other in tense silence, and standing in the middle, towering over everyone else, was the largest Rothic Jiwon had ever seen, Alpha Vrix. The Alpha's eyes locked onto their approaching vehicle. His lips pulled back, revealing teeth as long as daggers. This is it, Nari whispered. Whatever happens now, thank you for trying to save them. Jiwon didn't answer. He was too busy watching the cubs who had sensed their family nearby and were starting to chirp loudly in their carrier. The transport vehicle stopped about 50 feet from where Alpha Vrix stood. For a long moment, nobody moved. The entire colony seemed to be holding its breath. Then Jiwon opened the door and stepped out, carrying the carrier with both cubs inside. His legs almost gave out under him, but he forced himself to stay upright. He couldn't show weakness now, not in front of the pack. Alpha Vrix took a step forward, and the ground trembled beneath his weight. His eyes, which glowed a fierce yellow, fixed on the carrier in Jiwan's arms. Around him, dozens of other Rothic warriors tensed, their hands moving to their weapons. "Stop," the Alpha commanded, his voice like thunder. Everyone froze. Jiwan stood perfectly still as Alpha Vrix approached. The massive creature moved slowly, carefully, like a predator stalking prey. When he was close enough, he leaned down and inhaled deeply, scenting the air around the carrier. His eyes widened. "The cubs," he whispered, and suddenly all the rage seemed to drain from his face, replaced by something that looked almost like hope. "You have our cubs." "Yes," Jiwan said. His voice came out weaker than he intended. "They were in the crashed ship. They were badly injured. I've been treating them for 4 days." Another Rothic pushed through the crowd, a female with red markings on her armor. She stopped next to the Alpha and also scented the air. "It's them," she confirmed. "It's really them." "Let me see them," Alpha Vrix demanded. Jiwan carefully set the carrier down on the ground and opened the top. Both cubs immediately tried to climb out, chirping and calling, but they were still too weak to move quickly. The Alpha dropped to his knees, and Jiwan saw tears forming in the massive creature's eyes. "Little ones," he breathed. "Oh, my little ones, you're alive." He reached into the carrier with surprisingly gentle hands and lifted the larger cub. The cub chirped happily and nuzzled against his chest. The female warrior, who Jiwan guessed was part of the pack's leadership, carefully lifted the smaller cub. But something unexpected happened. The smaller cub cried out in distress and tried to wriggle away from the female warrior. It twisted in her grip, reaching back toward the carrier with its small paws. "Shh, little one," the female said softly. "You're safe now. You're with Pack." But the cub wouldn't calm down. It cried louder, a sound of pure panic. And then it did something that made everyone gasp. It called out in a voice that sounded almost like a word. "Jiwan, Jiwan." The cub was calling for him. Jiwan stepped forward without thinking. "I'm here," he said softly. "I'm right here." The moment the cub heard his voice, it stopped struggling. It turned its head toward him and reached out with both paws. The female warrior looked confused, then shocked, as the cub practically leaped from her arms toward Jiwan. Jiwan caught the small creature, and it immediately buried its face against his chest, making soft whimpering sounds. The larger cub, still in Alpha Vrix's arms, also turned toward Jiwan and chirped. A heavy silence fell over the entire crowd. The Rothic warriors stared in disbelief. Even Alpha Vrix seemed frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. Beta Karn, the warrior who had taken Hayek and Mirai prisoner, stepped forward. "What is this?" he growled. "Why do the cubs respond to the human this way?" "Because he's been the one taking care of them," Mirai called out from where she stood with the other hostages. "He's barely slept in 4 days. He's given them his own blood to keep them alive. As far as those cubs are concerned, he's family." "That's impossible," Beta Karn snarled. "Pack recognizes Pack. They should know we are their own kind." "They were unconscious when Jiwan found them," Mirai explained. "When they woke up, he was the first thing they saw. He was the one feeding them, warming them, speaking to them. He imprinted on them, or rather they imprinted on him." Alpha Vrix finally found his voice. "Human," he said to Jiwan. "Give me your name." "Jiwan," he replied, keeping the smaller cub held securely against his chest. "Jiwan," the Alpha repeated, as if testing the name. "Why did you save them?" "You are not Pack. They are not your responsibility." "Because they needed help," Jiwan said simply. "I couldn't just let them die." "Many would have," Alpha Vrix said. "Many would have seen them as weapons to use against us, or as valuable commodities to sell. Why didn't you?" Jiwan looked down at the small cub in his arms. It had stopped whimpering and was now resting peacefully against him, its tiny heartbeat steady and strong. "Because they're children," he said quietly. "They didn't ask to be born into a universe full of violence and suspicion. They didn't deserve to die alone and afraid in the wreckage of that ship." He looked up and met the Alpha's eyes. "I don't know what happened between your kind and mine in the past. I don't know what terrible things might have been done. But these 2 cubs had nothing to do with any of that. They deserved a chance to live." The Alpha stared at him for a long moment. Then he looked down at the larger cub in his own arms. The cub was quiet now, but its eyes kept drifting toward Ji-won. "You said you gave them your blood?" the alpha asked. "Yes, they had some kind of toxin in their systems from the crash. My blood seemed to neutralize it. I don't understand the biology behind it, but it worked. Show me your arms." Ji-won shifted the cub to one arm and held out the other. His forearm was covered in needle marks from where he had drawn blood for the transfusions. The skin was bruised and discolored. Mireille pushed forward through the crowd. "He gave them nearly a fatal amount of blood," she said. "By all rights, he should be in a hospital right now." But he refused to leave them. He's been working for 4 days straight with almost no food or sleep. Alpha Vrix reached out and gently took Ji-won's arm, examining the marks. His enormous hand was surprisingly gentle. "You did this," he said slowly. "You weakened yourself to save cubs that are not your own, cubs of a species you barely know." "I did what anyone would do," Ji-won said. "No," the alpha replied firmly. "You did what very few would do. Most would have calculated the risk. Most would have thought about potential rewards or consequences. But you—" He released Ji-won's arm. "You simply saw children in need and acted." Ji-won swayed slightly on his feet. The exhaustion and blood loss were finally catching up to him. The world tilted, and he would have fallen if a young Rathic warrior hadn't rushed forward to steady him. "Tracker Rin," Alpha Vrix called. A sleek female Rathic with silver fur approached. "This human needs medical attention immediately. Take him to our ship's medical bay." "What about the cubs?" Ji-won asked weakly. "They will come with you," the alpha said. "It seems they will not be separated from you willingly." As if to confirm this, the smaller cub tightened its grip on Ji-won's shirt and chirped defiantly at anyone who came too close. Alpha Vrix turned to address the entire colony. His voice carried across the destroyed streets and damaged buildings. "I came here for vengeance. I believed you had harmed our young. I see now that I was wrong." He gestured to the destruction around them. "We have damaged your home. We have threatened your lives. And all the while one of your own was risking everything to save 2 cubs he had never met." The alpha placed his hand over his heart in what Ji-won recognized as a gesture of respect. The Blood Mountain Pack owes a debt to this colony. More specifically to Ji-won. A debt that can never be fully repaid. Beta Karn stepped forward, his face showing conflict. "Alpha, surely we cannot—" "Silence," Vrix said calmly but firmly. "I am Alpha, my word is law. And I say that this human has shown more honor than we gave him credit for. He will be treated as Pack." A murmur went through the assembled Rathic warriors. Being treated as Pack was apparently a significant honor. Tracker Rin gently took Ji-won's arm. "Come," she said in heavily accented human language. "You need rest. We will care for you as you cared for our young." As Ji-won was led toward a Rathic ship, still carrying the smaller cub while the larger one followed close behind in the alpha's arms, he looked back at the colony. Hyuk and the other colonists were staring at him in amazement. Nari had tears streaming down her face. "Is it over?" Ji-won asked weakly. "Is everyone safe?" Alpha Vrix nodded. "Everyone is safe. Thanks to you, human. Thanks to you." Ji-won smiled, and then the exhaustion finally overwhelmed him. His vision went dark and he felt himself falling. Strong arms caught him before he hit the ground. The last thing he heard before unconsciousness took him was the worried chirping of 2 small cubs and the alpha's voice saying, "Protect him. He is precious to the pack now." The larger cub crawled onto Ji-won's chest as he lay unconscious in the warrior's arms, settling there as if standing guard. It looked up at the alpha and chirped once firmly as if to say, "This one is mine." And Alpha Vrix, the feared leader of the Blood Mountain Pack, smiled. Ji-won woke up in a bed that wasn't his own. The ceiling above him was metal, etched with designs he didn't recognize. For a moment he panicked, not remembering where he was or how he got there. Then he felt the weight on his chest. Looking down, he saw both cubs curled up against him, sleeping peacefully. The smaller one had its tiny paw resting on his arm, and the larger one was snoring softly. Despite everything, despite being in a strange place surrounded by potential danger, Ji-won felt peaceful. "You are awake," a voice said from beside the bed. Ji-won turned his head to see Tracker Rin sitting in a chair nearby. "You have been unconscious for 18 hours. The cubs refused to leave your side the entire time." "Where am I?" Ji-won asked, his throat dry. "On Alpha Vrix's command ship, in our medical bay." She stood and poured water from a container into a cup, then helped him drink. You were severely malnourished and suffering from dangerous blood loss. Our doctors have been treating you. Ji-won looked down at his arm and saw fresh bandages. The colony? Is everyone okay? Yes, the Alpha has ordered all pack warriors to help repair the damage we caused. Your people are wary of us, but they are unharmed. Why did you attack them in the first place? Ji-won asked. Rin's expression darkened. Because we have lost cubs before. 3 cycles ago, a human ship intercepted one of our transport vessels. They took 4 cubs and demanded ransom. When we paid, they sent back bodies. They had sold the cubs to collectors who did terrible things. Ji-won felt sick. I'm sorry. I didn't know. How could you? You are one man, not responsible for the actions of others. She reached out and gently stroked the larger cub's head. But you showed us that not all humans are like those monsters. You showed us that some will give everything to save a life, even one that is not their own. The door to the medical bay opened, and Alpha Vrix entered. He had to duck his head to fit through the doorway. Behind him came a female Rathik that Ji-won hadn't seen before. She was smaller than the Alpha, but still tall, with beautiful gray fur marked with white patterns. You're awake, the Alpha said with obvious relief. Good, we were beginning to worry. Who is this? Ji-won asked, looking at the female. The female stepped forward and tears were visible in her large eyes. I am Matriarch Sarah, she said in careful human language. Was the mate of the scout ship's pilot. These cubs are my children. Ji-won's eyes widened. But we thought everyone on the ship died in the crash. I nearly did, Sarah said quietly. I was thrown from the ship during impact and fell into a ravine. I was trapped there for days, badly injured, calling for help. When your people finally found me yesterday, I had accepted that I would never see my cubs again. I thought they had died with their father. She moved closer to the bed and looked down at her sleeping cubs. Fresh tears spilled from her eyes. But you saved them. You kept them alive when I could not. You gave them your own life force when they were dying. I just did what needed to be done, Ji-won said quietly. No, Alpha Vrix said firmly. You did what few would have the courage to do. You saw beyond species, beyond politics, beyond fear. You saw only 2 small lives that needed saving. Sarah reached out and gently touched Ji-won's hand. In our culture, when someone saves the life of pack cubs, they become bonded to those cubs. It is called kith bond. It means you are considered family. I don't understand, Ji-won said. The cubs have bonded with you, Alpha Vrix explained. They see you as their protector, perhaps even as a parent figure. This is very rare between species, but it has happened. And when it does, we honor it. What does that mean? Sarah smiled through her tears. It means you are part of our family now. Part of our pack. My cubs have 2 parents now, me and you. Ji-won looked down at the sleeping cubs, overwhelmed. I don't know anything about raising Rathik cubs. I was just trying to keep them alive. And you succeeded where many would have failed, Alpha Vrix said. He pulled up a chair and sat down, his massive frame making the furniture creak. Ji-won, I must tell you something. When I first came to your colony, I was prepared to destroy everything. In my grief and rage, I was ready to commit terrible violence. He looked at the cubs. My mate Sarah is the sister of my heart. When I thought she and the cubs were dead, I felt only the need for vengeance. I did not care about truth or justice. I only wanted someone to pay for my loss. But you stopped, Ji-won said. Because of you. Because one human showed me that hatred and assumptions can blind us to the truth. The Alpha reached out and placed his enormous hand on Ji-won's shoulder. You saved more than just 2 cubs. You saved your entire colony. You saved my soul from becoming something dark and unforgivable. A small chirping sound interrupted them. The larger cub had woken up and was looking at all the adults around the bed. It chirped again more insistently and patted Ji-won's chest with its paw. I think someone is hungry, Tracker Rin said with amusement. Sarah laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Always hungry, that one. Just like his father. Her voice caught on the last word and the joy in her face dimmed. I'm sorry for your loss, Ji-won said quietly. Your mate, did he die quickly? Yes, Sarah said. The impact killed him instantly. He felt no pain. For that I am grateful. She wiped her eyes. He would have been proud of you. He always believed there were good souls among all species. Over the next few days, Ji-won recovered his strength while remaining on the pack ship. The cubs stayed with him constantly, only leaving his side when Sarah came to feed them or when Jiwon needed medical treatments. The Rathic doctors were amazed at how quickly he healed, attributing it to the bond he had formed with the cubs. Pack bonds are powerful, one doctor explained. They strengthen both parties. The cubs need you, and that need gives you strength to recover. Meanwhile, down at the colony, a remarkable transformation was taking place. The Rathic warriors who had come to destroy were now working alongside humans to rebuild. Walls were repaired. Buildings were reconstructed. Equipment was replaced with technology far superior to what the colony had before. Hyuk visited Jiwon on the ship, bringing Mirai with him. "I can't believe what's happening down there," Hyuk said, shaking his head. "The pack is giving us advanced technology, offering trade agreements, even talking about establishing a permanent alliance. All because you saved 2 cubs," Mirai added, smiling at Jiwon. "You're a hero." "I'm not a hero," Jiwon protested. "I just did what needed to be done." "Yes, we know," Hyuk interrupted with a grin. "You've said that about a dozen times now. But the result is the same. You prevented a war and started a peace." Alpha Vrix entered the room and Hyuk and Mirai immediately showed respectful gestures. "The Alpha had that effect on people." "Jiwon," the Alpha said, "I have come to discuss your future." "My future?" "Yes, you have a choice to make." Alpha Vrix sat down and the 2 cubs immediately ran to him, climbing up his legs like he was a tree. He smiled and helped them settle in his lap. "You can return to your old life, working in the mines, living in your solitary outpost. We will honor you and remember you, but you will not see the cubs grow." Jiwon felt his heart clench. The thought of not seeing the cubs again hurt more than he expected. "Or," the Alpha continued, "you can accept the Kith bond fully. You can come with us when we leave. You can help raise these cubs alongside Sarah. You would be the first human to live as part of a Rathic pack." "Leave Earth?" Jiwon asked. "Leave humanity?" "Not forever," Sarah said, entering the room. "The pack travels constantly. We would return to human space regularly. You would see your people often. But your home would be with us, with the cubs." Jiwon looked at the 2 small creatures playing in the Alpha's lap. The larger one looked up, met his eyes, and chirped happily. The smaller one immediately tried to climb down and run to Jiwon. "I don't know," Jiwon said honestly. "This is all so much to process." "Take time to think," Alpha Vrix said. "We will not leave for another week while repairs are completed. But know this, Jiwon, regardless of your choice, you will always have a place in the Blood Mountain Pack. You have earned that right through your actions." That night, Jiwon returned to his outpost for the first time since bringing the cubs to the colony. The place felt empty without them. He sat on his bed, looking at the medical equipment still scattered around, the blood bags with his name on them, the improvised incubator he had built. He had spent 3 years in this outpost, alone, preferring solitude to company. He had convinced himself that he was happy this way. But now Nari visited him the next morning. "I heard about the choice you have to make," she said. "Word travels fast. It's a small colony. Everyone knows everything." She sat down next to him. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to stay here, where things are familiar and safe. But another part..." He trailed off. "Another part wants to be with the cubs," Nari finished. "I saw how you looked at them, Jiwon. I've never seen you show that much emotion about anything. They changed you. They're just cubs." "No," Nari said gently. "They're your cubs now. At least part of them is, and you're part of them. That's what the Kith bond means." 3 days later, Jiwon stood in front of Alpha Vrix's command ship, carrying a small bag with his few possessions. The cubs ran circles around his legs, excited and energetic now that they had fully recovered. Hyuk and several other Cole,